Hey guys, it's Gary again. I really wanted to do a video today, and I didn't actually have any real subject matter prepared. I'm lowering my stereo. I got something playing in the background. Um, so I'm scanning, watching, the regular folks that I subscribe to in the VC, and Ben Costello had left a thread response video, um, a bit belated perhaps, for something that somebody who's new to me, Mark in the UK, known as drrhythm, had posted up in January. And I was not familiar with Mark drrhythm, but I did go after watching Ben's video to find out where the whole thread started. And basically, it's to pick a tune that's been done in a lot of different ways by a lot of different artists. And so there's a lot of songs that could fall into. And I'm certainly old enough to, if I went the pop song route, God, especially from the 60s, I guess you could pick, any 60s radio hit. But certainly you could choose something by the Beatles, for instance, and have a zillion different versions of their stuff done. And for some reason, my mind didn't go there. Oh man, I forgot what Mark's original song was. And I know the song by the Stylistics. I think I forget. And the funny thing is one of the versions of the song is on a Milt Jackson album that I have that I love very much, but I can't remember what Mark's original choice was. He went the I guess it would be considered a soul song, that route. And Ben's response was he chose "Goodbye Pork Pie Hat," which is a great selection, by Charles Mingus, who had, which was covered by a ton of people, including Jeff Beck. A lot of people that don't know anything about jazz think that's a Jeff Beck song anyway. For some reason, and I don't know why my mind didn't go toward pop songs. I guess there's so many, and being as ancient as I am, I could probably do. I could probably choose a song and think of even a non-Beatles song, and think of anything that Sergio Mendes covered probably has been done a million times. For instance, for some reason though, my mind didn't go there. It went to Rodrigo's Concerto di Aranjuez, which I don't know why. I happen to love the piece, and I'm by far no classical music expert. I don't know why that track came to mind first. And then I was looking at, I can't remember now whether it was on Mark's page or whether it was on Ben's page or not, Mark being drrhythm in the UK, where there was a talk about great CTI albums, because the one of the albums that Mark showed was the Milt Jackson album, which was on CTI, which had the track that he was focusing on. And they started talking about CTI. And even almost as soon as the thread started, I got the idea of, do Concerto di Aranjuez by Rodrigo. And looking on the page, and I think it was on Mark's page, we're talking about, what they consider the best CTI albums from the jazz label. That was around the 60s and 70s. And one of them that they, oddly enough, totally coincidentally brought up, because I was already thinking this before I saw this, was Jim Hall's version of Concerto di Aranjuez, which is, a big favorite of jazz folks. So when I saw that, I said, that's a really weird coincidence, so I'm going to go ahead and do it. And I don't even know if I pulled all my versions of it. When I was looking for one of the albums, I actually came across another album that had it on there that I completely forgot. So I can imagine how many in my stack and CDs that I haven't even gone through that it appears on. But to do a little bit of my history with the piece, I'm not sure where I first heard it. But I honestly believe that I heard it in a horror movie the first time. I am a fan of Mario Bava, the late Italian film director, who in the early 70s created this film called Lisa and the Devil, starring now I can't find her name. Well, that's her picture on the front. Who's the star of it? Elkie Summers. That's her. That's her on the cover, on the poster. I guess it's the original movie poster. It's a horror movie that all atmospheric. I love very much, and it was playing a lot on New York TV in the mid to late 70s. And I caught it there numerous times, and I think I might have I bought a VCR as soon as they became available in the late 70s. So I may have actually recorded it, because this is before you could buy even movies on videotape. I probably recorded it onto an old beta video cassette back in the day, so I rewatched the movie, because I remember being very familiar with the theme and thinking, wow, it's a really beautiful theme. No idea who it was. And I'm pretty sure that's where I first heard it. I didn't know it was a well-known classical piece until many years later, and I don't know what the order was, and I got a lot of these tracks. But once I actually found it on album, then versions of it started cropping up all over the place. I'm not doing this in any kind of order, but just to show you just what I found in a quick look through my collection, and I didn't even flip through most of my vinyl. Now, no big secret, there's going to be a lot of classical versions, traditional class. There's John Williams doing a version of it, and I think John Williams recorded this more than once. Narcisco Yepes, another classical guitarist, who also recorded Concerto de Aranjuez. Who's the guitarist on this? Gerald Garcia, another version. I don't even remember buying this one, but it was in my classical CDs. I kept all these versions together, which was a good idea. Here's another John Williams version, though it might be a compilation, I'm not sure. And in more of a new age kind of vibe here, they actually put it on, because it's a fairly mellow piece. It's beautiful. If you haven't heard this, you owe it to yourself to pick up a version of it. In more of a new age guitar for relaxation and meditation, which is really kind of very beautiful CD. There's a version of it on here as well. Offhand, I don't recall who it's by. It doesn't list it on the bottom. And now getting to say more unusual versions of it. Probably the furthest out version of it that I can think of is Tomita, the Japanese synthesizer player, did a version of it on his Cosmos album. And if you're familiar with him interpreting classical works, you know that there's oftentimes very little of the original theme left. He really improvises and does his own thing with it, but the theme is noticeable in this version. I haven't played this for a while, but now I got to pull it out and play it again. But yeah, it's on here too, and this is probably the furthest from the traditional way of playing it. One of the best known versions, and I have it on 3 different CDs as well as album, was Jim. This is one of the best known versions, and this was one of the CTI. Considered the best, one of the best CTI albums. Is probably one of the most popular, and they do a version of it, a jazz version of it, with a rhythm section and drums and everything, and improvise on it. And I think it's Chet Baker that's on trumpet here. It plays incredibly. Chet Baker, Ron Carter, Roland Hanna, the pianist, Paul Desmond, saxophone player, Steve Gadd on drums. I think this version is from '75, I want to say. And I bought this on album originally. Bought the CD when it came out. Bought the CD when it came out again because they included some alternate versions of tracks from the original ones. I have this the same album at least 4 times, and the tracks are different on like every version. But this is a lot of people's, I think, favorite version of this, or second favorite. In a jazz context, certainly. It took up the full size of an album. How long is it? It's 19 minutes and 14 seconds. Of course, they improvise on it. And is it Chet Baker on trumpet? Yes, it's Chet Baker. Beautiful, beautiful trumpet. The trumpet's really playing the main melody. I think when you hear it, you might know it. You might already know it without even knowing it, that you know it because it's been used so much. It's a fantastic album, and probably one of the best known and best loved CTI albums, and it was mentioned as a matter of fact, as being one of the best CTI albums in the video. Now, that was a very, very, very popular album for Jim Hall. Years later, though, he actually recorded another version with the Dave Matthews Orchestra, and I want to say this was probably done. I could pull out the booklet, but it's going to take a while. Oops, and of course stuff drops out. When was this recorded? 1981. I think the first version was 75, the very popular version on CTI. And Jim Hall recorded it again with the Dave Matthews Orchestra. Somewhat confusingly titled Concerto di Aranjuez, so it's where the other album was just called Concerto. But it's probably confusing, and probably a lot of people missed it thinking it was the same album as the other album called Concerto by Jim Hall. But it's a different group, a different orchestra, different supporting musicians. This one has Tom Harrell on trumpet. Big section. There's some people I recognize here. Mark Egan even plays bass on this. David Charles on percussion. Dave Matthews on electric piano. It's his orchestra. This is a nice version as well. It can't top that original 75 version, but it's nice to have an alternate version recorded about 6 years later. And the version I have playing in the background by the LA4. I don't know how many of you guys know the LA4 because it's kind of... I don't seem to get a good response when I do very conservative, traditional type of jazz in a lot of ways. But I love these guys. I'm not sure if Bud Shank is still alive, but it was initially formed by 4 musicians in the LA area. Shelly Manne, the drummer, very well-known drummer, jazz drummer, owned Shelly's Manhole in California, I think in LA. Very, very famous jazz club. You see a lot of live albums recorded there, especially in the 60s. The late Ray Brown on bass, who passed away not that long ago. The Brazilian guitarist who moved when he was 30 years old to the United States from Brazil, Laurindo Almeida, who plays just strictly classical guitar, doesn't play electric. And Bud Shank on alto sax and flute. This was a great band. You know, until recently, I knew Bud Shank was around, but I'm not sure if Bud Shank is still alive or not. If he's not, he would have passed away recently. But this was a great band. Very kind of conservative, polite, you may call it, jazz. They do a lot of jazz standards. They do some originals. Most of them are Sonny Rollins tunes, Dizzy Gillespie tunes, Girl from Ipanema type of things, Antonio Carlos Jobim songs. But they do a 13-minute version, which I have playing in the background, but it's probably way too quiet for anyone to hear. They do a 13-minute and 14-second version, and it's very different than the Jim Hall version. The Jim Hall version, a lot of improvisation, but it's also got a steady rhythm. It's got a very nice, subtle jazz rhythm to it. Whereas this version is almost more classical, even though it's a jazz band with drum kit and everything. It's very low-key. Very acoustic oriented. There's no electric instruments in there at all, with the upright bass, classical guitar, horns, and just drums. Very, very subtle drums, brushes on the drums, not even drumsticks for the most part. And it's very close to the original kind of arrangement, just pared down for the 4 instruments. These guys were great, and I don't know if they really received their due because, you know, they didn't really start until, well, I want to say the early 70s. But it was a time that, you know, jazz was getting fusiony and, you know, early R&B, you know, smooth jazz before it was called smooth jazz. So these guys, though very well known individually, probably didn't get the attention that they deserved. And someday I would do a video on them, but I just don't think that many people are interested, sadly. Now, the single most, certainly in the jazz world, version of this would probably be Miles Davis, Gil Evans' Sketches of Spain. This probably introduced the album, the tune. When was this? I want to say this is 1959, and I don't know why I want to say that. I don't know how I remembered that. The recording took place in late 59, and it looks like it came out in early 1960. for a lot of people that aren't classical fans, but were Miles Davis fans, and this isn't really a jazzy version. This is orchestra stuff. This is an orchestral version, as Gil Evans wrote orchestral music. So it's very much unlike the Jim Hall version, which is kind of pared down for a jazz ensemble. The orchestra is really the focus on this, with Miles' trumpet on top. And this is certainly in the jazz world the best known version of it, and probably even one of the better known versions of it overall, except for people that only listen maybe to classical music. And I was trying to dig that album out because I knew I had to show that one. I found another John Williams Concerto d'Aranjuez, which I had on album. This is probably covered on one of the 2 CDs that I showed to John Williams. I don't know how many times he recorded it, but I know at least one of those CDs was a compilation anyway. This version I forgot about, and I love, and I'm dying to get this on CD, but it's out of print. Jan Ackerman did a version of it written by the orchestrator Klaus Ogerman that blows my socks off. I like it as much as I like the Jim Hall version, which I love. And this was just a blind buy that I bought. The album has a 1981 date, which sounds about right. I picked this up long before the CD era. And unfortunately, the version here is under 6 minutes. But this whole album is great. And this is one of those I missed. It came out on CD, and I don't think this is on the Jazzman label from Seattle, Washington. I'm absolutely sure that label doesn't exist. And at some point, I think I saw this on CD, but by the time I even saw it on CD, it was out of print and demanding outrageous prices. If anybody ever finds this on CD and they're not particularly interested in it, please let me know, because I'd love to get it. Klaus Ogerman is a fantastic arranger, and he does a great job on that album. And that's all the versions I dug out just in my, you know what, I probably have more of them in my little version of it, but that's my history of it. I don't know why my mind went to the concerto versus a pop song. I think a pop song would be almost too hard to trace. So that's what I chose for my first ever video response. I hope it adds something to the proceedings. And I don't know. I don't know how many people out there. If you don't subscribe to drrhythm, I'm going to go watch a bunch of his older videos now. Mark in the UK certainly seems like this is. I already subscribed to him. This certainly seems like an interesting and worthwhile channel certainly for the folks that would watch my videos, I think. So I'm probably going to be familiarizing myself with some of Mark's older videos. And that's all I got for this. Hope I didn't go on for too long. I always go on for too long. But that's it. And,